Welcome into another edition of Bourbon South. I am Chase Parham, your host, and this week we're going to talk to John T. Edge. John T., the author of many different books, including the Potlikker Papers, a food history of the modern South. He's the host of a television show on the SEC Network and ESPN called TrueSouth, looking at food around the southern states. And John, really an expert in food and how culture is kind of melded with that. He's a very interesting guy we sit down with, an Oxford native. He's one of the main people with the Southern Foodways Alliance that is founded and hosted at the University of Mississippi. And we sit down for about 45 minutes. We talk about food, we talk about bourbon, we talk about alcohol, we try some different things. And he tells us how he got his interest in the things that he has made his career. John is contributing editor at Garden and Gun. He's a columnist for the Oxford American and many more things. So he was very gracious with his time. Myself and Steve Thomason will ask him questions or participate in the conversation. So this week, we've got John T. Edge. I hope you enjoy, and we'll get to that interview right now. John T. Edge joining us this week. Appreciate the time. I'll tell you, we had Ross last week. You're already our favorite guest because we had to supply bottles last week. John T. bringing in bottles himself, a lot of bottles. We'll get to them. Chase Parham, Steve Thomason, as always. You'll grow to learn over the weeks of the show here. But welcome in. Appreciate the time. And what'd you bring along for us today?
Well, we're going to start with. I tend to drink bottles that people give me, and I appreciate that, or bottles that I associate with friends. And I brought a bottle from Maker's Mark that my friend Newman Miller, who's a chef up in Kentucky, up in Bardstown, it's his selection from Maker's Mark to his palate, and I like his palate. So that's one bottle. And the second bottle is a Willet Kentucky bourbon, straight up. It's 123 proof, kind of a bruiser, 8 years old, that a friend named Matt Bolus in Nashville from 404 Kitchen brought to me. So these are friends' bottles, and they're bottles I like, and I'm glad to share them.
Steve's eyes perked up when he saw Family Estate on the Willet over here when it came in a minute ago, didn't he?
I must say I have a smile on my face. There's two bourbons I tend to really enjoy. Anytime you get a shot at a Family Estate Willet, that's a really good thing. I love Maker's Mark. They're private selects, and so if John T's guy says it's good, I bet it's good. And I like this precedence he's setting, so maybe instead of us bringing the bottles, the guests bring the bottles. I'm all good with that.
We'll get into them a little bit. We're obviously going to talk to John T. about a lot of different things, but let's see how they are. Which one do you want to start with, Steve? What are we going to do today?
I think we'll have to do the Willet first.
And that's on the right. Okay, make sure.
Cheers, gentlemen.
All right. I mean, I know how this is going to go, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah, it's going to go good.
It's about what I anticipated there, I think.
Damn, that's really good.
Yeah. I can't argue with that.
I now regret bringing it to you infidels.
Oh, no. And so you leave the bottle.
No.
It's an offering around here.
I'm just looking at how much the shoulder decreased since I walked in this door, and I'm already regretting that after tasting this.
I tell you, I mean, that's my palate right there. Heavy and sweet, smooth, with a nice pop. You know, like you
say,
said,
you're usually not up on a 123, 124. That's a little high for you, Steve.
Well,
let's get.
No. You give me a good bourbon, like I'll drink a Stag all day, 134. But to me, that's what really, when you have that high proof of bourbon and the taste is that good and it's that smooth. To me, that's like John T. said, a damn good bourbon right there.
It benefits from. I just dropped a little water in it. It benefits from that. It kind of fluoresces. It opens up.
I'll drop a little cube in mine. We'll see how that goes.
Where does and we talked about this off show, but I mean for everybody else, I mean when you brought some other spirits here today too, where does bourbon kind of sit with you? And what is your typical, hey, I got home from the road, I'm going to sit down on the couch and relax a little bit. What are you drinking?
I drink bourbon. I drink bourbon or rye. I drink Boulevardiers, and I drink Old Fashions, and I drink Manhattans, and I drink variations on those drinks. We renovated the kind of side porch for our house about 3 years ago, and the thing I wanted was a bar, and I really like my bar. There's only one chair in that room, and that's the chair in which I can sit and read and sip a drink. And our house doesn't really work that way. We've got a really small house, so to have this one little space is a real luxury. But, in that room is a wide variety of liquors, things I bring home from travels, as I mentioned, gifts from friends. I have a real eclectic taste. I've got some asparagus liqueur in the back of the cabinet. I got a lot of rum. I got a lot of gins, a lot of bourbon. But the everyday stuff is a Boulevardier is probably the drink I drink most often. I got our son to start drinking Boulevardiers, but he really likes Negronis. So, that's kissing cousin to a Boulevardier gin and bourbon. And then we're at the point now, I can say to Jess, will you please make me a Boulevardier? And he's good at it.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is like, it's I got a month of that. He's about to go off to college. But for this month, I can say, son, would you please make me a Boulevardier? And he makes a really good Boulevardier.
What makes the old fashioned good, and what bastardizes it and kills it? What's the way to do it to not mess it up? Because there's a lot of variation. I've got a theory here. I don't know if Steve, I've talked about this. I know I've talked about it on some of our other podcasts. I think that the re-rise of bourbon and maybe even like Mad Men and culture and everything changed the old fashioned because people didn't necessarily want the way it's supposed to be. They want it to taste better. So then you got so much more muddling and so much soda. I feel like I'm having an orange sun-kissed at times when I have these in bad places.
Yeah, people put a fruit cup basically in the bottom of it. I'll make an old fashioned two different ways. Okay. One, I got some Demerara sugar cubes up on top of the bar. And I'll drop one of those in the bottom, wet it with a little water, crush, add bourbon, orange bitters, and if I got an orange laying around, I'll just take the rind and go. I've also got some orange shrub. You know orange shrub?
Yeah.
It's a rum-based liqueur. It comes out of the Caribbean. If I'm feeling lazy, I'll just throw some orange shrub, which is pretty sweet. I'll throw like a half jigger, like just basically a tablespoonful of shrub in a glass, throw in some bourbon, and that's a lazy man's old fashioned, and I really like it too.
That sounds tempting. I'm not the cocktail guy sitting here out of this bunch, but I do love orange, and that has potential.
Orange shrub's worth. I got mine from, I think it's Rum Clement, and it's I got it from Woodland Wine and Spirits in Nashville, which is a good place over at East Nashville. They kind of hand sell liquor the way Square Books hand sells books.
Oh, wow.
Which is one thing that, that's how I want to spend my money, from somebody who knows the bottles they have and take pride in the bottles they have. And, but that shrub is great. I got some coconut shrub, too, from there, which is fantastic with rum, like on a day like this when it's hot as blue blazes. Again, it's kind of a great way to start a drink off, and if you're feeling lazy, it's a 2-ingredient drink and it's good.
Interesting. That's my second favorite, coconut. I love this smell and taste of orange and coconut. So I may have to take a shot at that, John T.
Standard podcast question for, I'm assuming the thousands of times you've been told this, but how did this all start? I mean, how did food kind of become your life, your profession? I mean, all the way around. I mean, what was kind of your relationship to it that got this going?
And to your point, like I've been asked that a lot. I'm going to try to answer it in a different way.
Okay.
Because there's a bunch of different ways to answer it. One way to answer it is that I grew up really close to a barbecue joint in small town Georgia, and I was an only child, and I've got a piece coming out in the Oxford American about my childhood. I never thought I'd write about it, but some things went wrong in my childhood, and I found escape, and I went looking for community in a way in that barbecue joint. So I fell in love with the role that restaurants play in a community. And then when I got here for grad school, after flunking out of college, after taking corporate jobs and doing pretty well at them, and then deciding to go back to college, I arrived here. And I really just came here for the Center for the Study of Southern Culture to finish my undergrad degree and then get a master's degree. And I realized along the way that my obsession with food and drink, which began in my childhood and began in that barbecue joint, that I could study food and drink, and that the things I wanted to think about and talk about, I could get access to by thinking about food and drink. So I don't come from a restaurant background. I don't come even from a writing background. I come at all this stuff from a cultural background. I think about food and drink as a cultural product, not sure it's an agricultural product, sure it's an industrial product in some cases, but I think about it as a cultural product, and it starts there.
And it gives them a different appreciation too, because you're trying to figure out what's connected to it. How are people interacting? Because it's all about, hey, in the later podcast we've already recorded, one of our guests talks about, you have good food and good drink, but the people, the conversations, the environment, all those different things that make up really more of the meal than the actual food.
So what are good in food? What are good in Bourbon's taking effect.
It is 125.
It is. What are good food and drink catalysts for? What do they enable? What do they make possible? What happens at a good table? What happens at a bad table? All those things are of interest to me.
I do have a question about one thing. I'm kind of jumping around everywhere, but I know you did some judging on Iron Chef. That was the thing. How long did this take? What is this day like with this? Because obviously it's a 60-minute competition or whatever, but I was enamored with that show the entire time. What is this thing like?
It's a long damn day. I mean, it's the last one I did. They moved production out to L.A. and you're in the green room they get you there really early in the morning, and then you're in the trailer for makeup, and then which is really a lot of fun. And it's as a boy who doesn't really get makeup, like you sit there and you're next to a woman over here, and like you watch transformations of everybody. It's kind of fascinating, but I got there the last time I did it at like 8 in the morning and left at about 2 in the afternoon. And there's a lot of prep and setup, and then the competition itself really is an hour. But then afterwards they reset and then do judging and all that, and their outtakes and their, the thing that's most remarkable about Iron Chef to me is two things. One, how intense the competitors are and how seriously they take it, and at the same time how goofy the whole thing is. Like, it's so playful. And I like that. I like that kind of yin and yang of something that's really serious and also goofball.
But the competitors are really trying. I mean, they're locked in.
They're really trying. I mean, they're really trying, and there's no, like, it's not like a game show from the 1960s or 70s that's a setup. Like, the deck isn't stacked. They're not trying to like something like Top Chef and some of those others. They're trying to build some kind of psychodrama. Like, what did you think when he touched your asparagus? Like, there's none of that craziness. Top Chef is pure, and Iron Chef is kind of pure, and I like that about it because it's really just a competition. You put those guys and girls in Kitchen Stadium, and they go at it.
Do you know what ingredient you're getting before you run into it that day?
They used to, like when I did it, and it was back in New York, they would give you, like when you got there, they'd tell you what the ingredient is. They'd give you like a study sheet. Like, here are the things to know about, ground hamburger meat. But now you just know when you walk into the thing.
What food do you hate? Like, if you got run into it, what's the thing where you go, hey, I can eat this because I have to do it, but I don't really want
I don't really hate anything. There are things, I am not accustomed to some tastes like durian, that fruit from Southeast Asia. Smells like, rotten egg meets putrefied chitlins. But who am I to say that, like, that's not a beautiful funk, because people in Southeast Asia grew up with, and that when they smell that, their mouth salivates. Like, there are things that I eat and love, from boiled peanuts, which some people think of as gross and kind of mucilaginous, to okra, which people certainly think of as mucilaginous and nasty. Like, I kind of like everything. There's some I don't like green bell peppers. I don't like the taste of green bell peppers.
I'll second that.
I don't particularly like canned black olives. I don't love a lot of organ meats. Like, I love the idea of, like, menudo at, the taco shop on a Saturday morning. But the reality is I don't like tripe that much. I don't like the texture of it. I respond as much when I don't like something, it's often about the texture that I don't care for. But I'll eat everything and anything because I respect the people who make the food, or the people who raise the food, or the idea behind the food, or the culture that, out of which the food came. So that's a long answer.
Oh, no, all good. I'm just kind of curious because you're doing so many different things now. You got TV going on, you got another season of that coming out soon, you've got writing and different things. You almost kind of come off to me as almost, the newspaper type of person, simply from the standpoint of always looking for that next cultural thing, that next story, that next connection somewhere. Is it one of those deals where you just sort of find it everywhere and you run into something and something clicks? I mean, how does that process work for you?
Well, I mean, you mentioned newspapers. I mean, I was such a fitful college student. I was in Athens, Georgia, in the early 1980s, which is a great time for music and a lousy time for me to be in school. But if I'd figured stuff out at that point in my life, I would have studied journalism. And the University of Georgia has a great journalism program. The weird irony is I flunked out of the University of Georgia, and now I teach in that journalism program, which makes no sense. But I'm glad it makes no sense because that means I get to do it. But I'm curious. I mean, that's kind of it. I'm fascinated by stories. I'm fascinated by new ways to tell stories. And I use Evernote like a crazy man. And I look like a crazy man sitting in the corner of just about everywhere I go, or I go to the bathroom and I take too long in the bathroom because I'm taking notes in the bathroom in my Evernote. I think about stories all the time, and that to me is the currency of my business, whether it's the work I do with the Southern Foodways Alliance, or the work I do with the TV show TrueSouth, or the work I do for the Oxford American, or the work I do for Garden and Gun, or whatever it might be. My job, my talent, if I got one, is figuring out good stories to tell. Now, whether I'm the best writer in the bunch, or the best TV host, or the best of anything, I really think I'm pretty good at figuring out what's a good story to tell. And that's the great pleasure, is now when people know that you're interested in food and drink, and you want to use food and drink to tell bigger stories, they tell you things. My stories come from walking down the street in Oxford and somebody going, hey, I went to this place and I think you'd like this or you'd find it interesting. That's a great pleasure because once people know what you're passionate about, then they feed you things. Literally and figuratively.
You've had to be the most organized, at least compared to your former self, that you've ever been. I mean, you got stuff everywhere then, don't you? I mean, you got Evernotes, you got whatever. I mean, there's stuff everywhere in there.
I'm obsessively organized because I'm obsessively overbooked. Okay. And I'm also obsessively fearful of becoming that college flunk out again, right? I mean, when you make mistakes early in your adult life and don't know kind of how to handle that, then you come out of that in kind of renaissance and say, okay, I'm going to work my rear off and I'm going to value the opportunities I have. And I think that's part of what drives me to do maybe too much.
We're working our way through the Willet. You want to give the makers a shot and see how it's going?
So this figures in the next season of True South. Newman Miller, who picked this special reserve, or private select is what it's called, led me to a show. I was talking about people telling me things. Newman Miller brought me a sack of lukewarm hamburgers to a dinner one night and said, man, you got to eat these. And I ate them, and they were remarkable, and it always stuck in my head when we were casting about for shows. Newman's passion for these hamburgers came through, and he's got an amazing palate, and it shows in his taste in those burgers, and it shows in this whiskey.
Okay. Can we say where the locations are for the season this year?
Yeah. So the 4 will be. I think we can. Let me think this through before I answer this fully. No, it is not officially announced.
Okay.
But I can say that we were really close there. But
I was trying to go breaking news right there. You
should have waited 3 more drinks.
Yeah, I got really close.
I will let the nice folks at ESPN and the SEC network announce where they are. But I'll say that if you can figure out where Newman Miller lives, you could probably figure out where one of the shows might be.
Very loyal to the people that pay you, is what you're saying. Let them announce it. Apparently, that's how the world works.
There's a really good trailer that my colleague Tim Horgan at Bluefoot Entertainment has developed. It's really good. And that's the way it is announced to the SEC and to the world. So
I like it.
It's right up your alley.
Yeah.
It is incredibly smooth. It is. It's just. I mean, it's light. It is very, very light.
I mean, you went from 427 to 107,
but
109.
It's not even about the for 109. It's about the lightest I've ever tasted.
Yeah. But
it is the.
And here again, in my opinion, when a 109 is that smooth, it's a good bourbon.
Yeah.
Because so many times, if the bourbon's not good, the heat just jumps all over you. You know, Chase, it's funny. I used to think of myself as a world traveler or travel a lot or whatever. And after John T. and I became friends, I quickly realized this guy travels 10 times as much as me, like you wouldn't believe. In fact, I think half the time I send him a text that starts out, "Hey, traveling, man, how's it going?" Because
that is the way you asked me. I mean, to do the work I have to do and to raise money for the Southern Foodways Alliance, which is a part of my job too. Like, I have to leave Oxford, and I don't necessarily want to do that. You know, that's the big challenge: is how do you do the things you want to do and stay in the place you want to live.
What's left for you? What's next? What's kind of in your mind where you go, hey, you know, you got the TV show, you got all those things. Is there something sort of out there that you go, hey, is next for you in a way?
I mean, I've written a number of books over time. I'm most proud of the book I most recently wrote, which is called the Potlikker Papers. It's kind of a food history of the modern South. I want to write another book that that takes what I learned in that process about narrative and about how to engage an audience, and I want to do more of that. I love making this TV show. I don't love making TV. I love making this TV show. I love working with my neighbor, Wright Thompson, from here in Oxford, who's executive producer and just one of the most brilliant idea person, narrative persons I've ever met. And Tim Horgan, our other primary collaborator of Bluefoot Entertainment, it's a dream team. And then Seventh Movement, the camera wizards, I stepped into something amazing. And I'm really careful to say, I don't want to make TV. I want to make this TV with this team. Because I'm punching way over my weight, and I like punching over my weight.
And TV is a different medium too, because you are on such a schedule. You've got to tell that story so tightly too, and it's got to happen so quickly that's a challenge. That's a tough deal.
It is, but it's a great thing for a writer to do. Making TV makes me a better writer. It helps me understand narrative better. It helps me understand the arc of a story better. It helps me understand what carries a story and how to be frank, how to manipulate the emotions of your viewer to respond to this thing that you think is emotionally wrenching and important, and how do you bring along a viewer into that? And I've learned so much, and I want to learn more, and I love doing it.
Are we bringing the other bottles out at some point today?
Absolutely. What do y'all want to do next?
I think John T wants to kind of show us a little difference here. A little other thing going on.
Rye, gin, and rum.
So I want to do the rye and the gin together, please.
All right.
What do you want to do with glasses?
I'll just stack them over here. I'll bring yours.
It's not the perfect pod, but we're getting set up here.
Yes.
You're hanging in. You're hanging out with us for the hour. Just pour another drink, and it'll be all right.
If you could see the scene right now, you would see Steve working hard at servicing the bar, and you would see now what's hit the table is a bottle of Bristow 2-year reserve barrel rested gin, which I really like. It's like a summer bourbon. It's got, the color is kind of, what would you say that color is, Steve?
It's pretty amber. It's dark.
It's. And this is just my ignorance. I always thought gin was clear, and
well, it was until they put it in the barrel.
That's bourbon.
Just like bourbon was clear until they put it in the barrel.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a member of the Cathead family out of Jackson. That distillery is people are most aware of with our network over the years.
Yep. I admire the heck out of the Cathead boys. They're for businesses with kind of a civic responsibility and moral responsibility. I've never seen another business come out of the chute so quick, doing right and doing good things in the community is Cathead.
They do a lot for arts and different things. Yeah, they are. They are very involved with that.
Okay, gin on the right and rye on the left.
Yep. So this is a rye made by Highwire, Ann and Scott, and in Charleston, South Carolina. It's an Abruzzi rye, a particular variety of rye. They've pioneered this approach to making whiskey that's very much based on the heirloom grain at the base of the spirit. And
I got a little smell. Chase is going to like this. That's floral, just the first thing that jumps to me right there.
And then again, this is all like, these are conversations with friends. Ann and Scott are really good friends. And Marshall is an incoming board member for the Southern Foodways Alliance.
Hey, John T., for those that don't know that much about the Southern Foodway Alliance, why don't you tell us about that?
So we're based at the University of Mississippi. We're an institute of the Center for the Study of Southern Culture at the university. We're founded in 1999, and I've been the director since inception. We have 7 colleagues here at the university. We tell stories about the South, and we use food as a way to do it. We make a podcast called Gravy that's different from this podcast in that they're reported like magazine-style stories. We make probably a dozen films a year. We do oral history work. In other words, we go out and interview old guard row crop farmers or oystermen and women or fried chicken cooks. And my colleague Anne-Marie Anderson does that work. She lives down in Water Valley. We stage events. Our symposium coming up in October will be our 22nd one here in Oxford. And those are kind of revivals for true believers in food and drink in the South. We do a lot of stuff, and we get to do it from a base at the University of Mississippi, which has supported us from the beginning. We began asking questions about how we can understand the South better by understanding food and drink better 20 plus years ago. We're lucky to get to do it.
How can people help? What do you need from people? How do people get involved with that in a way?
But the best way to get involved is to become a member. Okay. It's a nominal fee. It's $75, and you get a quarterly journal called Gravy that's edited by my colleague Sarah Camp Milam, who lives here in Oxford. But almost everything else we do is free. The podcast, all the films are all accessible via the web. So the best way to engage is to consume our content, to become a part of the conversation and become a member. The membership really just gets Gravy in your mailbox and services what it takes to call you a member. If you live in Oxford or if you live far away, come to the Fall Symposium. It's a 3-day event that I think, and I mean this because I'm proud of my colleagues who stage it, it's the smartest, best, most delicious food and drink event in America. And the food's great because John Currents is the commissary chef and Vish Bhatt is the commissary chef. And it's enjoyable because Oxford's the host. Like, this city becomes a campus for 400 people who come from around the country.
Which one should we start with? You're running the ship right now.
All right. Is this the way they're lined up?
This is the way they're lined up.
All right. Let's go first with the Bristow. The 2-year
right,
barrel rested. It's on the right.
It's the lighter one, right? Yeah.
I get like all kinds of spearmint craziness.
Yeah, it's like that is a heck of a mint kind of opening. That is crazy. Because I've been very almost averse to gin in my life. Mm-hmm. Like I just, whatever reason, it's not a deal. I had an aviation at an event a couple weeks ago and really liked that, but otherwise, Steve was with me for that.
Right.
This is
interesting.
This is really, I think, underappreciated. I think it's remarkably good.
I can see why you call that a summer bourbon.
Yeah.
It's almost a cocktail in a glass. Yeah. There is a little bit of floral. There's some mint. There's some floral. There's a lot there where you don't feel like you're just drinking straight liquor out of the glass at all.
I'm getting is it honeysuckle almost, or there's something there? No, I get the mint heavy, and something's coming after that.
I think this is a remarkable spirit.
And that's from Cathead?
It's from Cathead. And it's, you can, at least last time I looked, you could get it at High Cotton pretty recently.
And so it's the colors from the cask.
Yeah, just like, you know this, but I'm sure the listeners know this too. You're marveling at the color and saying, why is gin that color? Why is bourbon the color it is? Because of time in the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Juniper, that's what I was looking for.
That's what you were looking for?
Yeah, I'm reading the back of the bottle now.
Yeah.
Instead of honeysuckle, juniper,
Yeah, well, juniper is, as you know, traditionally found in gin. What's remarkable to me is that crazy mint. And if you're reading the back of the bottle, they're not even talking about mint on the back of the bottle.
Right.
And that's the very first.
No, to me, that's it.
I get mint too, yeah. They're recognizing licorice root, sweet orange peel. I get the orange peel.
I get the licorice, I think.
Now. Yeah. I think it's remarkable. It's reasonable, and it's made here in Mississippi, and it's unique. There are other people who make barrel-rested gins, and I've pursued a lot of them, but I don't find anything even close to this. It's really, really good, I think.
This is amazing because, Cathead has been one of our sponsors over the years and at different times with our podcast network, and I've always stayed away from the gins for whatever reason. I've tried everything else, like, during the summer we'll always pour the honeysuckle vodka and the lemonade and all that kind of stuff, but this is really, really good, like completely.
It's fantastic. By the way, we were talking about old fashions before. Yeah. Like, make an old fashioned with that.
Really?
Yeah. Make an old fashioned with that. I first learned to do that. I was in at a bar called Mayahuel in New York, and they made me a mezcal old fashioned. It's like, oh my gosh, this works because the smokiness of the mezcal works great, and it gave me this. And then I had a rum old fashioned at Cane and Table in New Orleans once, maybe about 5 years ago, and both made me think like the old fashioned. And then Jerry Slater and my colleague Sarah Kemp Milam did a book for the SFA Guide to Cocktails. And I realized what they did, they grouped that book by types of cocktail. Like, here are all the old-fashioned light drinks. Here are all the Collins-like drinks. Here are all the Manhattan-like drinks. And then once you know the formula for an old-fashioned, once you know the formula for a Manhattan, try all the different spirits. And this Bristow makes a great old-fashioned.
It would be very different. It'd be very, yeah.
But the flavor profiles that you start with are comparable enough to understand, like, as you take a sip of this, you can taste what an old-fashioned would taste like in your head.
Yeah.
It looks like Chase is sold right there.
I'm sold. I'm kind of flummoxed a little bit right now, honestly, because, I'm telling you, I've been around this stuff for years, and I've been like, fine, whatever. It's all good, but okay.
It's also, this Cathead, the barrel rested, is really good with just some soda. Not tonic, but just straight up soda and a lime.
Cut it a little bit. And
like in a Collins glass up high. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. What's the rye we're dealing with?
All right, so the rye mentioned is from our friends Ann and Scott at Highwire. They just announced last week that they're doing a big expansion in Charleston. They're really kind of national leaders in using heirloom grains and thinking through the ag processes behind good whiskey. Let's take a sip of the rye.
Highwire's kind of popping out on the scene a little bit.
Needs some ice just to kind of clear the palate a little bit.
That's a good call. Chase, we have a problem. I want to talk to John T for like numerous hours right here. We're going to have to get him to get back on the show
at some
again.
point.
We're going to have to get him back on the show again.
He's a nice guy. When he's in town, we'll figure it out. The problem, he's only in town like 8 days a year, so it's a little bit of an issue on a scheduling standpoint.
My challenge now is like when I'm in town, like I'm just saying, I'm staying home.
Yeah. We can come there. It's all good. Just sit around the table.
Absolutely.
We're around here.
What do y'all think about this?
Heavy grain taste.
That hit me way different than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
How old is that? I'm saying that's going to be pretty young.
Yeah.
If it is.
This is batch number 11, bottle 114. I don't know if it has an age statement.
90 proof on it.
Yep.
That does not hit my palate anywhere near as good as the other one does, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, it's completely different, obviously, but
Right.
it just.
It's to me, it's a heavy grain taste. I'd like for it to be a little older, I think.
Yeah.
But it's got some good flavors to it.
It's better as it goes. The front is really
Right.
harsh, and then once it kind of gets down you a little bit, you go, okay.
Smooth on. You know what? I'm going to throw a cube.
What you're saying, the heavy grain taste, I get that rye, and I can visualize a loaf of rye bread.
And in all fairness, and I've said this 100. I'm not a big rye guy, so
I know this. Yes,
that is not. Yeah.
It even smells like
So
it
you
more
say
than
you've
most
heard
of
that
it.
before, John T.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it for all those reasons. I mean, I don't have one kind of whiskey or distilled spirit I like to drink. I kind of like to drink a range of stuff.
Right.
And to me, this says so much of rye. It tastes so peculiarly and specifically of rye that I love it.
I just dropped a cube in it, and it made me like
Appreciate
it
it a little
100% more. Absolutely. A cube in it's good, no doubt. So, John T., I know just in your travels and all you do, you meet some like extremely interesting people, and this can be a goofy question. You cannot answer it, but like, who are some of the people that you've met that just jump out at you like, wow, that was interesting, that was whatever?
Huh.
And you can see Chase is a better question asked.
I could just say Chase is one of those people.
There you go.
That would get me somewhere, I think. I don't know how to answer that question. I feel like I'm privy to a lot of worlds because I work as a quasi-journalist, and I'm a storyteller, and I get to enter into people's worlds and be quiet and listen. And I love that. I love sitting in a corner somewhere, hopefully unobtrusively, while somebody lives their life or does something interesting. And I love to watch. It's like that, that old film, Being There. The character says, "I like to watch." I like to watch. That was a reference to a bedroom scene, but the watch I like to do I like to watch. I like to watch and listen. And the thing I've realized is that I'm not any more enamored or interested in the famous person than I am the person who's not. Like, just getting access to somebody's life, eavesdropping on a life, observing a life is like, it's a blast.
Because every life is interesting.
Yeah.
There's something that everybody's dealing with. There's something they go to. There's something with anybody.
Well, then it goes back to John T. as a storyteller, and he is seeing all these stories with the people he meets. And I tell you, it's interesting. My youngest son and I and John T. and Jess went down to New Orleans, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, 1st of January, whatever. And it was just such an interesting thing to me because we're going in restaurants, and everywhere we go, every chef, they find out John T.'s in their restaurant and they're bringing food out. And I remember, and we ate at Shia, and Cooper declared it's the best meal he's ever had in his life. But I asked John T. about halfway through the night, I'm like, how do you not weigh 800 pounds? I mean, because every time we walk
I really
in a
feel
place,
sorry for you, by the way.
That's exactly the way you should feel.
Yeah.
And he had to quit tweeting. I mean, he couldn't tweet because, like, I know people were going like, why aren't you coming to my place? But it's so interesting being with him in these places, and the people know him, and it's just so unassuming or whatever. He is very unassuming and just a very down-to-earth guy. He is what you get. He's a storyteller. But that was the big thing that jumped out at me, is just like, oh my gosh, all these people, all this food. And he's like, I grew up to where if you got food put in front of you, if it's good, you got to finish it. He looked at me, he goes, you can't. He goes, you absolutely cannot do it. Or you won't last long.
It's true. I mean, and people in that industry know I have a friend, a chef and restaurateur in Birmingham, a guy named Frank Stitt at Highlands Bar and Grill. And Frank does like the more elegant version of that. Instead of like bringing stuff out to the table, he will like it is a beautiful expression of his pride in his food. And his ego on display too, and I mean in the sweetest way. Like Frank will, when I'm there, he'll bring a dish by and let me look at it. It's like great, because I can't eat all this food, but he's so proud of it. When you see it, like you can see it in his face. He's proud of the ingredients that went into it. He's proud of the technique that went into it, and I love that. He would just like parade about it, like, look at this thing, man. Look at this.
It's gotten more acclaim, but Birmingham's a good food town. It's an underrated food town.
Birmingham's booming right now.
I wouldn't even say it's underrated anymore.
Yeah.
I think people are figuring it out.
I think it's finally figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, I used to reject questions, like Steve's questions, like, who are you most fascinated with? And you noticed how I moved away from that.
No, like I said, it's probably a dumb question.
It wasn't a dumb question, but it's one that I won't answer, right? Yeah. But I used to do the same thing. What's your favorite restaurant? And I don't anymore. My favorite restaurant is Highlands Bar and Grill in Birmingham, Alabama. My favorite restaurant anywhere in this country and anywhere across the pond is Highlands Bar and Grill.
And with good reason, because it is really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a place. The Southern Foodways Alliance was founded in Birmingham at a meeting on July 22nd, 1999. And that night, the founders, there were 50 founders, of which I think 34 were there that day. We all adjourned to Highlands for a big group dinner that Frank cooked for everybody. And so, my modern life and my job, my work begins at that restaurant. And I've developed friendships with everybody from Goran Red Dog Avery, who's the senior waiter there, to DeLester Miles, the Beard Award-winning pastry chef, to Chris Connor, the bartender. Like, these are my friends. And I celebrated my 40th birthday there, my 50th birthday there. When I turn 60, I'm going to be there. And this Saturday, no, not this Saturday, next Friday night, my wife and I will be at that restaurant with Goran Red Dog Avery as our waiter. And we drive to Birmingham just to eat.
Really?
And not just at Highlands. There's I can name you 10 restaurants.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
And one of the best liquor stores I think in the whole country, Linnell's Liquor Boutique is there, run by Linnell Smothers. She's one of the best beverage retailers in the nation.
Birmingham is the interesting place where it's so fun for me because we'll go for SC Media Days or SC Baseball Tournament, and all the media is going, hey, we're just going to stay here. I'm like, no, Birmingham, there's tons of places. There's so many things. Like, quick going to so-and-so in this chain. Like, there's so many places to go.
Easy on the road, man. Ain't got much of that.
I went easy. I poured light.
This bottle's almost gone.
Yeah.
So we're at Brugal 1888. It is a Ron Grand Reserve Familiar, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. It's only an 80 proof, so pretty light.
It's good, though. It's really good.
This is one of your favorites, I think,
yeah.
isn't it?
It's really hard to find. It is, I believe, aged in rum. In Scotch casks. It has some raspiness to it on the back end. It is really dry. I think it's remarkable.
You're getting me into more spirits because I end up just going in stores and looking at nothing but bourbons, and I'll pick one and I'll walk out and I'll move on with my day. And he's pouring alcohol back into his bottle right now. By the way,
because I don't want to waste it.
Just pointing that out.
So, you talk about Birmingham, but we talked about Oxford a little earlier, and you talk about you hate leaving here, whatever. So, Oxford is a neat town. It is. Town. What makes Oxford special to you?
People. I mean, I love this town. I love the physical environment of this town. Like, looking out the window right now, I can see the courthouse. I can see the big canopy of trees. I can see people coursing the streets. And I love all that. If I crane my neck, I can probably see Square Books across the way. I can see Ajax over there. And I love all those things, but what I love more is the people. I mean, the creative community here, especially, of writers, musicians, podcasters. I had no writers in that. The creative community here, artists, is remarkable and kind and not contentious and supportive. This is a community that contains people I love and admire who aren't even a part of that but see the value of that. People like Ron Shapiro, who's a dear friend and I think one of the best champions this city has of its cultural import. And people like Wayne Andrews, for Arts Council, who sees that value and leverages it for economic good. This is an amazing place full of amazing people. I get frustrated with Oxford because I don't think Oxford manages growth very well. Yeah. And I think there's too much money pouring in here we don't take good enough advantage of what could be done with that money for civic good. And yet, the people make this place for me.
Everybody always uses the word oasis, and it almost becomes a cliche a little bit, but it's a little true. I mean, you go anywhere else, and it's like, okay, it's not here. It's not everything that's going on around this area right now, in a way. So
it is. I worry about some of that now because our most recent hire at the Southern Foodways Alliance, I mentioned her a moment ago, Anne Marie Anderson. She and her husband have bought a house in Water Valley, not in Oxford. And we have a grad student, really bright and compelling woman, Olivia Terenzino. She and her husband bought a house in Water Valley. I worry about all this money pouring in here, which is jacking up costs of living here, and whether the next generation of the creative class of Oxford will be able to afford to live here. So I wonder if that oasis will be sustained, and I worry about that future. Yeah.
Kind of last thing here, I know you're going to go in a second. So we mentioned cocktails at the very beginning. The Sazerac is my drink. That's my favorite. It is absolutely, if I could have one, that's what I'm getting at.
Sorry,
I'm not good at it.
Yeah,
no, it's all good. I'm not very good at them. I screw it up at some point. Where am I messing it up, in your opinion? What am I doing wrong? Because I can go to St. Leo, I can go to Snack Bar. I'm happy. I cannot do it at home.
It's interesting. Like Calvin Trillin, writing in the New Yorker, writing about Boudin, once said that, and I'm going to paraphrase him horribly, but he basically said, Boudin is not to be consumed outside of a parking lot in Cajun country. It just doesn't taste right. And there's a way in which, every time I go to New Orleans, the first drink I want is a Sazerac. Mm-hmm. And there's some really dreadful Sazeracs in New Orleans, but there's some really good ones too. And it is not a drink I make at home very often, though I've got a big bottle of Herb Saint sitting up on my counter as if I'm going to make a Sazerac, because like you, I
have all the ingredients. I'm good.
Right.
But
it's almost like you
think it's an environmental thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost, but it's not like there's a microclimate of Sazeracs. It's like that drink tastes best in the place of its birth. And even if the Sazerac I drink in New Orleans is as cruddy as the Sazerac I make at home, I'm going to enjoy the one I drink in New Orleans.
I'm sitting at the bar, I'm going to Clancy's in 30 minutes, and I'm happy.
Right.
I'm good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. But I try to make them at home. I may go home right now and make one. I think I will make one. Okay. But I think the problem is too much simple syrup. It's always a problem. In 90% of the drinks I drink, there's too much sugar. Too much sugar. But there's got to be enough sugar to caress your palate, to kind of soften things. Yeah. Too many people put too much sugar in everything. It's like people love Chick-fil-A. The reason you love Chick-fil-A is because there's sugar all over the damn chicken. And it's like, they're making Chick-fil-A Sazeracs,
it's club soda that kills me on the old fashioned.
Oh yeah, it's
too much club soda.
Well, it's better than the Sprite some people put in there.
Whoa, Sprite? Yeah, really?
Yeah.
People put Sprite in old fashions?
Yeah, they do.
That's the thing?
See, and this is why I stay out of the cocktails, boys. I'll take my bourbon neat.
No, I mean, a great old fashioned is great. Right. A Sazerac is great. A Manhattan is phenomenal.
We're talking about kind of I love going to I drink a lot of mezcal drinks when I travel. I love somebody who's a really good bartender who can make a really good mezcal drink. I like trying all sorts of things. When Blair and I were just in London and Edinburgh, we went through this moment when we were like, let's try these drinks, and then we came back to let's have a martini. Simple classic drinks, well made. I'm down.
Very last thing, you got to get out of here. What the bourbon craze, the crazy prices, all the stuff, good or bad for the industry?
I don't know if it's good or bad, but I'm bored with it.
Okay.
I don't really have any interest in pelt hunting for bottles. I like, we talked about the bottles I brought. They're all ones that I have some kind of relationship to. The person who made it, the person who gave it to me, the thing it reminds me of. I have no interest in finding out what the highest rated bourbon is and going seeking it out. I don't want to spend that kind of money. I don't want to go through that kind of harassment. I just want to, I've got this Henry McKenna 10-year-old, and I bought a case of it because my friend Newman Miller, the same guy who got me that great Maker's Mark bottle, Newman's like, I bought a bunch of this Henry McKenna. If you want a case of it, I'll sell you a case of it. He didn't sell it to me, of course, because we're on the air. He let me borrow that case of bourbon.
That's a good friend.
Newman's a very good friend. But, that 10-year-old Henry McKenna is my well.
But you're kind of proving the point because that won the San Francisco World Championship years ago.
Yes.
It became impossible to find.
So it is.
Became impossible to find.
But I don't care. I don't care.
That's so funny. No, because you could get McKenna on the show. I remember we were talking about.
Really?
Yeah, no, we were talking about Ross. Ross 4 years ago was like, Steve, this Henry McKenna 10 years awesome, and he would get it, and I would run into it every now and then. I'd get a bottle. I'm like, this is really good stuff.
12,
Yeah. But Fred Minnick declared it's the best spirit in the 2018 competition or in San Francisco. I think it was him. Somebody did anyway. It won, and so now it's
unicorn now.
Yeah, now it's a $30 bourbon, which is as good a $30 bourbon as you can get, and you can't find it for $30 anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when, this affinity for bourbon becomes an obsession with bourbon. And I appreciate all the knowledge it takes. Like, you and I have friends, people like Mac Nichols here in Oxford, who have crazy great palates and can discern all that. I'm not that smart of a drinker. I don't have that good of a palate. I'm not saying I want to dumb it all down, but I don't have any interest in finding the very best bourbon and killing it and slaying it and dragging it back to my cave.
I like that. Hey, so we're going to have Mac Nichols as a guest.
We will. Yeah.
Oh, you definitely. Mac's palate is remarkable.
We've recorded already.
We've already done. Yeah, that's the inside joke. We've already done one with Mac, and he's outstanding, obviously.
Yeah.
But and I don't have a palate. I think I told Chase he's my go-to bourbon guy when I get into the serious question. He knows it.
Yeah.
Way beyond me.
Enjoy home. Enjoy the Sazerac tonight, and home for a few days. So appreciate it.
I am. I've got a couple weeks now, which is great.
We'll be back next week as always with these. We'll keep going for a while. So appreciate it. We'll talk to you then.